Now let's head. Normally we'd have to well, I guess we were going to Rose Bowl to Sugar Bowl. We'd have to head like 2,000 miles east. Now, well, we got to head down to Houston and then over on I-10 to New Orleans. So it's still a little haul, just not quite as bad. Clemson versus Ohio State, primetime game on ESPN. It is 8 o'clock Friday night. It is the Sugar Bowl. It's my most fun bowl game to go to. They feed you, in my opinion, better than any bowl game on planet Earth. It is wonderful. I had a taco bar down there last year that was to die for. I mean, I almost died. I've never eaten like that in my life. And that has nothing to do with the game. I just wanted to share that. So, Ohio State is a 7-point dog in this game, 7 or 7.5, depending on where you look. There's this conversation out there right now that I think is pretty laughable. And the conversation goes a little something like this. Maybe you've heard it. And I hope you haven't participated in it, but if you have, it's not too late to change your ways. The conversation goes like this. Clemson's played in what, 11 games, however many games they played in, and Ohio State's only played 6. That means they're going to be fresher. No, friend. No, no, no. Now that the games have been played and Clemson's not badly banged up, all that's out the window. Ryan Day would gladly trade his team's portfolio with Dabo Swinney's portfolio because there's something that Clemson's been able to do that Ohio State, through no fault of their own, it's just the hand that fate dealt them, hasn't been able to do, and that is work out the kinks and find a groove. There has been no opportunity to find a groove. Ohio State, it feels like they've played about one game in the last half a year. And so what I don't like about that is they haven't had to taste their own blood. They haven't been pushed. It's just, again, it's not their fault. It's just the way things fell. On the other hand, there is one thing that you can like about this, and that's the ambush potential, because we have not seen Ohio State's best game. I know it, you know it, they know it, Dabo knows it. We have probably seen Clemson's best game. Now, Clemson could play 5 of those games. It's not like they have one of those in their bag, but Clemson's probably hit the stride they need to hit right now to give them an optimal chance to win in the playoffs. They have perfected that formula. Ohio State, there's no way they could be there. I mean, if you were to think back, what did Clemson look like 6 games into the season? They weren't where they are right now. So it's no different. It's not like this is an Ohio State problem, but we'll see. Because with that comes the ambush potential. And the ambush potential is simply this. It's kind of like Oregon with Southern Cal a couple of weeks ago. Southern Cal was favored in the Pac-12 championship game. And I picked Oregon. And my simple philosophy there, and it was kind of a guess. There's no real model or computer guidance system that can tell you this is coming. I just thought Oregon's a more talented team than the product it's put on the field, which means its best game is still out there. If they're ever going to find that best game, it would be in the Pac-12 championship game. Well, we can apply that to Ohio State. If they're going to find that best game, wouldn't it stand to reason it'd be in the college football playoff? We'll see. You're also going to hear a lot of Fields versus Lawrence talk. I won't participate in that because they'll never be on the field at the same time. A lot of NFL draft types will talk about it from that angle, and that's okay. That's fine. I'm going to talk more about Fields and Lawrence because they're 2 of the main reasons we had college football this year. Don't ever forget that. Do not ever forget that there will be people actually in the Mercedes-Benz Superdome this Friday night covering this game that gave 0 assistance to getting this sport off the ground this year, covering 2 young men who gave pretty much everything they could possibly give to get this sport off the ground this season. I appreciate it. I appreciate it. Applaud both of them. Don't really care who wins and loses because those 2 used a really big platform. And actually, I'm telling you, talking to some people kind of after the fact, that stuff went a long way in getting the sport to actually happen this year. All right, let's talk about the game itself now. Red zone is probably where the padlock stat's coming from. The padlock stat on late kick is the stat where if you were to give it to me on Thursday, I guess in this case, if you were to give it to me on Thursday, I'd know who was going to win. Well, you let me know red zone, and probably even more so than in a normal game, it's going to determine this one. 2 points to keep in mind when you're watching the Sugar Bowl. Buckeyes Tigers here. Number 1, Clemson, they watched Trey Sermon go crazy in the Big Ten championship game, just like you did, just like I did. The guy is probably still running right now. Here's what they know. Brent Venables probably looks at that and he says, all right, that's fine. We're not going to shut him down. We don't need to. What they know, they being Clemson, is probably Sermon could run for 220 yards this Friday night and Clemson still win the game. And the reason they feel that way is because of the same reason they were able to, in several instances, but most famously a couple of years ago, I remember being out in California at the national championship game in a place that had no business hosting a championship game in the sport of college football. But I digress. There was no endless taco bar in Santa Clara, let me just say that. And so Alabama was moving the ball up and down the field against Clemson until they got in the red zone. Then guess what happened? Bad things. That team with Tua Tagovailoa and Jerry Jeudy and Devontae Smith and Henry Ruggs, the first round draft picks all over the place. They put 16 points on Clemson because they couldn't get it done in the red zone. And Brent Venables, not an overly prideful guy that night. He said, we're going to give up some yards, but we're going to win in the red zone. And that's exactly what they can do this Friday. They can give Trey Sermon 220 plus rushing yards. And as long as they shut him down, hold him to threes instead of sevens, or force turnovers in the red zone, it's all good. But see, the shoe on the other foot, it still applies here too. Because Ohio State, they know good and well they're not good enough to match their corners. This year's version of Ohio State does not have the corner talent to match up with big-time wide receivers. They don't. They've played soft coverage all year because of that. It has not been a traditional Ohio State pre-snap look in their secondary. Buckeye fans have picked up on this. If you haven't watched them closely, you will see it Friday night. But having said that, you get that compressed field down in the red zone, and all of a sudden you're not worried about someone going 50 yards over the top of your head anymore. So just as Brent Venables and company have to do against the run with Ohio State, you're thinking the exact same thing if you're Ohio State against what could be a very lethal vertical pass game. That's what bit Notre Dame last week. What do you remember, by the way, about this 2019 game? I intentionally haven't referenced it yet. I want to reference it now. This game last year, I thought the better team didn't win the game. A lot of people share my opinion there. Now, Clemson fans shouldn't care about that one bit, nor do you, I get the sense, because you won the game. That's really all that matters. I happen to think Ohio State was the better team. I was also a little bitter because I picked them, and I wanted to be right, and I wasn't. But what most people I have found remember about that game is they probably think Ohio State got jilted to some degree by the officials, or you remember, Ohio State was driving and they threw a pick in the end zone to pretty much seal the deal. That's not what I remember, though. I certainly remember those things. But here's what I remember. I remember a 16-0 lead for Ohio State. And having, if you believe in momentum, having all the momentum in the world, and Clemson, to their credit, still finding a way to get off the deck and come back and win that thing. How did Ohio State build the lead? They built it with tempo passing game. That's how they built it. And that was kind of atypical to what they had done through the regular season. Now, what does that mean for this year? Do they go about it the same way this year? Because Justin Fields, with the wide receiver talent he has, and it's very important to note that because they haven't always been on the field this year. But you got Wilson and Olave, and you've got Justin Fields there. You got talent in the backfield. If all of those elements are in place, the ceiling for what that offense's potential is way higher than most teams when you measure their average versus what their maximum potential is 6 games into the season. Like what Ohio State's offense has put on the field so far this year, there is a ceiling that is significantly higher than what you've seen. In other words, 22 points versus Northwestern, I think they're capable of more. They didn't need it that day, but they're capable of more. How much higher is that ceiling? Big question that we have to keep in mind going into Friday night. The intangible factor here that you can't ever quantify on paper, obviously, is I have seen elements of a killer instinct for Ohio State. Like Trey Sermon played with a killer instinct. Ryan Day coaches with a killer instinct. I don't question individuals on that team that have it. But if you've watched Clemson play, like their whole team has it. They have that. It's in their DNA. Most Ohio State teams have it. I hadn't seen it from this Ohio State team yet. That's one of the perils. Everyone's telling you it's an advantage to have only played 6 games. No, it's not. No, it's not. Because that stuff, that killer instinct stuff, sometimes if you're going to develop that in the season, sometimes you can't develop it. But sometimes an identity morphs in the season, and Ohio State hadn't had time to do it yet. They just haven't. And the other intangible factor to keep in mind here is Clemson has this innate ability in these big games, these playoff caliber games, well, not caliber, they're just playoff games, to make 50-50 balls become 70-30 balls or 80-20 balls. E.J. Williams is a kid who played just across the river from where I am right now, over in Phoenix City, Alabama. Came from the same high school Justin Ross did at Central of Phoenix City. Drove past it last night. He is the kind of guy who could explode on the national scene in this sort of environment. It's the kind of thing that Clemson has become famous for. They peak at the right time, and all of a sudden you're just watching their wide receivers make circus catch after circus catch on 3rd and 7, and you've done everything you can to get the offense behind the chains, and yet they're just what should be a 50-50 deal is a 70-30, 80-20 deal. You cannot know that's coming. There's just no way to know that's. It's like forecasting turnovers. You can't know it's coming. All right, Colin, let's look at the game capsule here. This one's really tight, obviously. The Las Vegas number has Clemson -7. Our late kick number, our in-house model here, per 1,000 simulations of this game, we've got pretty much right on the number, too. We've got Clemson -6.5. I've felt both ways about this game over the last week. When I first saw the number come out, I was leaning Buckeyes. That's without breaking anything down. Then there was a moment where I thought I was going to go Clemson by double digits. I have settled on, well, a compromise of sorts. I'm going to take Clemson to win the game, and I'm going to take Ohio State at anything +7 or higher. So give me the Clemson Tigers to win it, but I think it's going to be a tight game. Would not shock me at all to see a point spread upset here. I'm going to take Ohio State plus the points, take Clemson to win the game outright.